Welcome to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Maine, awesome wife and dog mom for life. I'm a sex therapist turned sex coach, and I run a successful business selling relationship enhancement products. I absolutely love talking about all things sex. So you can expect this podcast to explore all things related to women's sexual health because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you discover and embrace what brings you pleasure so that you can own your sexual self. If that sounds good to you, then keep listening and let's fucking do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Owning Your Sexual Self. I'm going to apologize ahead of time for the cracking of my voice. I'm just getting over a sinus infection. So if I don't sound as normal as usual, that is why. And also, please excuse me if you hear a cough or two in between this episode. I'll do my best to, of course, edit that out for you. But just wanted to give you a heads up. Thank you for your grace and patience. I appreciate it. So I'm recording today with a guest that I connected with through Instagram. And our topic today, as you can see from the title, is how ADHD affects sexuality and intimate relationships. Now, this topic I feel like is really close to me at this time in my life because as I've been following more people on Instagram that struggle with ADHD, and especially when it comes down to being an entrepreneur that has ADHD, I'm finding that I have more and more similarities between people that have this. And now I'm sort of doing my own personal research to see if perhaps I also have ADHD. So if you're listening to this interview today, I'm sure that you're going to hear some things from Chris Connelly. They are our guest today. And, you know, you might even be posing these questions to yourself like, this sounds a lot like me. And so I'm feeling like this episode is going to be relatable for a lot of you, myself included. So a little bit about Chris and their background. Chris Connelly started her sexploration in high school as a peer sex educator at the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. She went on to receive her degree in community health from University of Maine and to work at the Center on Halsted Community Center in Chicago as a health educator. In 2013, she began her research to hack online dating, which bloomed into her current 5-step dating course that she now has customized to serve the ADHD community. We will definitely make sure to get more information on that program for you listed in the show notes as well. And if you want to follow her on Instagram, you know, I love me some IG resources. You can find her at Distracted Love Chris. That is her Instagram handle. So again, it's at Distracted Love Chris, and her name is Chris Connelly. Her website available is also distractedlove.com. So if you want to go and figure out what maybe services she offers and how she might be able to help you better, definitely check that out. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Chris, where again, we're talking about all things regarding ADHD and sexuality. Enjoy. All right. Hey, Chris, thank you again so much for coming on today and talking about ADHD as it relates to sexuality and intimacy. I'm really, really excited to have you on. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for asking.
Good. So you're not in Michigan. Where are you located?
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay. Nice. Have you, is that where you're from or tell us a little bit about you.
I'm from Connecticut. I've lived all over the world. But I came back. I was living overseas and I had an emergency appendectomy the same day that my father had his pacemaker put in. So we're comparing scars on Skype at the time. My mother's like, you need to come home right now. I'm like, that's fair, Mom. I'll be home right after this contract. So I've lived in Boston for about 11 years now.
Wow. Okay.
For a while, yeah.
Very different than me. I've been in Michigan my entire life, which is not as exciting as what your experience has been. Well, cool. So when we're talking about ADHD, you're someone that also has ADHD. So what has that been like for you? If you want to start from the beginning, growing up, and just share a little bit of your story with our listeners, I think that'd be super helpful as we dive into this.
Sure. So when I was testing when I was in 4th grade, so that's like in the 90s, they said that I did not have ADHD. Definitely not ADHD. Definitely dyslexia. And then for a job to get accommodations for my dyslexia, like 4 years ago. Well, then I had a therapist after college. It's like, has anyone ever thought about ADHD for you? And at that time I didn't know because my mom hadn't told me that it said definitely no ADHD. I said, no, I don't know. She's like, let's put you on some meds, see how that goes. And my head was like a keg party. And all of a sudden, everyone at the keg party was queued up in a line and started talking to me one at a time. If you think about a party, how like everyone's voice are kind of like, rah, 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 right? But like when one person talks to me in a one-on-one conversation like this, all of a sudden the words made sense, right? So for the first time in my life, I could catch a thought and I was like, oh, yeah, this is nice. Also, I felt like I was speaking the same, but when now going back to like 4 years ago when I got a neuropsych, they said, actually, you absolutely do not have dyslexia. You're 1,000% ADHD. They told me to come unmedicated. So I did. And there's this face that if I can focus long enough, I'll notice that people make. Right? It doesn't seem to them like I'm speaking English. So I'll start on one sentence and I'll end in another sentence. And that's hard for people that think sentence by sentence to follow. So one of my friends in high school said, you have to speak, Chris. You have to know, to understand that this sentence is connected to this sentence, is connected to this sentence. But he said within a half an hour of me taking my meds, my sentences, for the most part, lined up. And I finished one sentence before starting the next sentence. It all sounds the same in my head.
Yeah.
So I don't see a difference. But sometimes my wife will be like, hey, did you take your meds today? I'll be like, no, babe, I'm just on my period. Because ADHD also fluctuates based on time of your cycle. So, I did my first podcast, and I didn't look at my cycle first. And I was all over the place. And now I'm like, oh, we're going to schedule nothing where I have to coherently engage with other people the week that I am bleeding. So, and it's not, just knowing that is so helpful to be able to have grace with yourself.
Yeah.
Not be like, oh God, I'm usually so good. Why this week have I lost my keys 20,000 times? And I've seen people put them on the hook 3 weeks out of the month. And then scheduling in after my period, like 2 days of like cleanup.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah.
That's been really helpful.
Yeah. I talk about period stuff a lot on the podcast and really helping people biohack and tracking their cycle because I think there's so many benefits to that. And that's definitely news to me, learning that ADHD also fluctuates with your cycle. So it's generally during the menstruation part of your cycle.
Yeah.
And would you say that's the same for everybody that has a cycle?
So there's not a ton of information, as you know, right? We're both huge Emily Ross. There's very little information out there. She can write a book this big, which is like, can't see my hair in the podcast, but like this teeny tiny that has all the information that is out there on women and sexuality, right? So there's not, like the original criteria for ADHD was for young white American boys, U.S. boys. Okay? That is what the criteria is built for. That's what the criteria is for. Now you're trying to take this criteria and put it onto other people. Now, 1 out of every 100 people is intersex. What is gender? What is sex? We could have a whole other podcast about that. But we are socialized, even if it's just how we're socialized. We're socialized, and the messages we get from children. So how this is going to affect how we engage in the world, or what's okay for us to engage in the world, how much anxiety we end up feeling instead of how much we act out, you know? You really play a role in that.
Yeah. Wow. This is already so, so great. So thank you again for coming on. So you then realized, so you went to a therapist. They said, have you ever considered ADHD? You got on meds. And then what changes did you start to notice in life after that?
So not many at that time, because, I mean, like I said, it all feels the same in my head. It's just externally, like other people are noticing. Meds, they do make me able to finish a sentence and to like focus on something as long as I'm kind of into it. Because the thing is, attention deficit disorder, it sounds like it's a disorder of attention. Like, you can't pay attention. Oh no, we're incredible at paying attention. It's what we want to pay attention to. That bird outside the window is way more interesting than the teacher in front of the classroom. But I can focus on that bird for 45 minutes just fine. Right? It's, the attention isn't going where other people want.
Yeah.
And the ability to actually like drive your attention as opposed to your attention driving you is something that I found in medication, I think, looking back. But what really was a life changer for me is I've always known, like since I've been in my early 20s, or mid 20s, I've known I had ADHD. I'm 38 now. But everyone told me, yeah, everyone has a little ADHD. It's not a big deal. It's not even a thing, right? And I, as someone who's always trying to like hack life, be better, do better, whatever, right? That's just like, my father says I'm tenacious. Like, it's a really good descriptor of how I try to like take on the world, and I'm learning to let go of the tackling a little bit now and kind of like be in the world. I don't know if you've seen Encanto, but I'm Luisa, and that movie gave me a total nervous breakdown. It's fine, we're working on it. So I've had this whole like the world's on my shoulders thing, my whole life that I've sort of pushed through. But then I joined Clubhouse, and I was just in this random social room, and I was talking about how I help people with relationships find love online, which I've been doing for 8 years. And then, or 9 now? What is time? Whatever. Pandemic time doesn't count. Around 10 years. Anyways, so then, I met this guy, and he's like, hey, I run an ADHD club. I'm like, oh, I have ADHD. And he's like, hey, I don't know a lot about relationships. Do you mind coming in and doing relationship classes? I'm like, well, I don't specialize in ADHD, but sure, let's go. So I went in, I did a little bit of research on ADHD. I had all the relationship background already. And my background is in sexuality, and so I had a lot coming into it. I just had to add a little bit of ADHD stuff, enough for it to do an hour interview. I'm like, oh, I got this, it's fine. People's response to that room, they said what I said was mind-blowing, was life-changing. And I thought I was getting very basic information. And I was like, wait a minute, what is out there right now? So that sent me in a deep dive into what's actually out there for ADHD people, and especially ADHD people that aren't young, white, American boys. I was like, this is horrendous. But as someone that's worked in the LGBT community since I was in high school, as someone that's worked with the trans community and the community centers in Chicago, like, I was like, bet, I got this. I know how to take the information that's out there. I know how to like craft it. And I am going to, at first I thought, well, I was doing coaching just on my 5-step program to help people find love online. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm now writing a book. The first For You, By You. So like, for people with ADHD, by someone with ADHD book that is intended for people with ADHD. So there's one book out there, Driven to Distraction, but in the first, or Distracted Love, I don't know the name of it now. Ned Hollowell, he has ADHD. He is a co-writer of that book. But in the first chapter, it says, this book is not intended for people with ADHD. It's just due to our ADHD background. We understand how in this society that is now everyone's distracted, like how to engage with it. This is not intended for people with ADHD. It's a book that's intended for people with ADHD, by someone with ADHD. Every once in a while there's a book with like a chapter. So if you think a chapter is going to help you with sex and relationships, and a lot of them don't even talk about sex at all, right? But like that's not part of the relationship. The relationship's all about doing dishes. So, anyways.
Wow. So, I mean, all from a Clubhouse invite, this kind of transpired for you, which is, I love the world of social media and things like Instagram and Clubhouse and all these platforms where people like us get an opportunity to speak. And I love that you said that. You thought you were giving very basic information. And that's, again, people, if this isn't directly related to them, or they don't know that it's directly related to them, why would they seek out that information, you know? So then they get on this thing, this title might spark some curiosity in them, and they join, and then they leave literally mind blown, right? I love that. And that is one of the many reasons why I do this type of work, because it's fascinating. I love talking about it. So When you're speaking directly about ADHD and now helping people with it when it comes to sexuality, what sort of challenges have you noticed that people with ADHD face when it comes down to intimacy and sexuality?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge that people have is not believing their self-worth. There's this book about ADHD that talks about how if every psychiatrist was a rose and a sunflower comes into their office, they're going to be like, I'm so sorry that you suffer from gigantism. And then not having tools, because it's like we're being gaslit, right? We're like, oh, just write a list and then prioritize it. Oh, my brain doesn't prioritize everything. Everything is on fire or doesn't exist. Also, if I write down the list, I then have to remember where I put the list, and my executive functioning on memory, not so great. So I understand that works for you and good for you. And like, everyone's different, right? So even within ADHD, there's a spectrum, which is why you get a full toolbox. You don't get like, here's a single one, this will fit for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, when we're talking about sexuality, right? The first thing that I really do with people is I show up as myself, right? I show up and I say, oh man, I really, I was really all over the place when I did this podcast and I was on my period, and I was still in that moment, I was like, hey, the reason I'm all over the place right now is because I'm on my period. And I used it as a teaching moment, but also I was like, let's not do this again. Right? But you can still just be authentic and honest about it. And self-acceptance, I'm less self-critical, right? Like, really like owning, like, I am perfect just the way I am. And every once in a while I get caught up in like, oh, but I'm supposed to make sentences next to each other that make sense. I can't always do that. Well, but then I'm like, you know what? They can't come, if you can make sentences next to each other, that's fine. You have a bunch of skills that are very useful. But one of the things that my brain can do is it can pull from 100 different things and make connections that you would never make. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you have once you can get over the shame cycle, right? You can get out of the shame cycle. Now we can look at what's actually happening subjectively, right? So, like, a quote-unquote problem, right? What is the quote-unquote problem? Is the ceiling fan too loud? There's these things called Bluetooth headphones. I have no connection to them or sponsored by them or anything, but what's cool about them is you put them in your ears and they have different decibel levels, so you can still hear your partner, or it's like right here, but you can no longer hear the ceiling fan, you can't hear what's outside, but you can hear something up close to you. So you can still have good communication, but all the other noise goes away.
What were those called? Loop headphones?
L-O-O-P.
Okay.
Loop. Yeah. And also, I'll just put, when I just feel like overwhelmed by existence, just put them in. Right? And you can still engage, but if someone's in the other room, they try calling, you might not hear them. But that's fine. You have light sensitivity, you're distracted by a room and clutter. Blindfold, or changing the space where you are, or going to a new space, right? Going to a hotel room sometimes, like the same thing in Emily's book, how in Come As You Are, where she talks about how there's the brakes and the accelerator, and you gotta sometimes, what's gonna get you off the brakes, right? The same thing, what's gonna take off the brakes when you have ADHD, which is why even for people with ADHD, even if they're not, female identified, I always recommend Come As You Are and Burnout, those two books, because just see what is possible, right? Because we're told that we're supposed to have quote unquote foreplay, right? Which is the thing before the event, right? And then there's the event, and then it ends in a climax, and then the climax is where we're going, and we're just running towards the place. It doesn't matter how we get there, we just gotta run real fast to the end, right? And to have, it's important that that concept kind of gets deconstructed and blown out of the water. Because otherwise, you are going to feel like, if you judge a fish by how it can climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking it's stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily what sex is going to look like for us and our partners, but it's going to be wicked fun if we can like figure out what works for us, because we can come up with all kinds of ideas and play in incredible ways that other people may not have thought of. You can't get your brain to be quiet. A lot of us, if we've had ADHD for a while, have go-to study music. For me, it's on YouTube, 30 minutes of uplifting, triumphant, emotional music by Harry Lightfoot. Your mileage may vary, but another thing is with ADHD is what works for you now might not work for you later. So you'll feel like, I found the tool! And then 6 months later you're like, why don't you work anymore? Come on, turn on! So you have to like have the whole toolbox, because tools are going to come and go, and a tool that might have worked for you 2 years ago can stop working. If you go back to it now, it might be great now too. So having flexibility with that and not freaking out and knowing that this is something that's just going to happen. It's okay. It's not the end of the world, although sometimes when this study music stops working, am I going to think it's the end of the world for a minute? Do you feel like you need to engage the whole time and then beat yourself up if halfway through you start talking about the presentation you have tomorrow? Cool. Another thing Emily talks about is the meter. Lower the bar. Lower the bar to the floor, right? Maybe it's okay, because there's two things that are happening. One, you're thinking about your presentation you have tomorrow, and then you're beating yourself up for thinking about the presentation you have tomorrow, because you're supposed to be having this transcendent sexual experience. Maybe every experience doesn't have to be a transcendent sexual experience. Maybe that's okay. And maybe in just giving yourself permission to not have every experience be a transcendent sexual experience, more of your sexual experiences can be transcendent. But all the pressure that you're putting on yourself is probably not great. Unless you're into that kind of thing, in which case I'm not trying to yuck your yum. Making sex a game, making sex a practice, all these things are just lowering stakes, right? And taking the goal out. It's not maybe like a fun one that I do sometimes, or advise some people to do, is like bathing suit area is off limits. Set timer for 10 minutes. Go. And just 5 minutes each or 2 minutes, I don't care, whatever. Just play with each other's bodies and be in a place of curiosity. Because if there's anything that our brains love a lot, it's novelty. So if all of a sudden you're touching the back of my knee and you've never touched the back of my knee before, all of a sudden my brain is giving me dopamine. Not always. Maybe we don't like touching the back of my knee. We don't know. But I'm just saying, or just pick an arm, whatever. You can spend 10 minutes touching someone's arm or touching your own arm and just getting curious and like finding new things you didn't know existed. And even if you're like, oh no, yeah, no, I know because you have a list that you created 10 years ago, right? But you change. Every 7 years you're a whole new person. Also, like you said, cycles are going to change how your body is going to react. Whether you're sick or not, whether you're whatever, the time of year, the temperature, all this stuff is going to change how things feel in your body. So what's happening right now? And being in right now is something that we're not super great at if it doesn't give us interest in dopamine. Right? So we're so used to like being like, oh man, this lecture is horrible. Where else can I go in my mind, right? Or like, oh, I know what's going to happen. It's going to be like 5 steps this way, 5 steps this way, turn around, now it's 5 minutes doggy style and we're done, right? So like, how can I get novelty back in and stay connected? But if we do the same exercise every day and it's the same stuff, now it loses novelty, now we're back to the beginning trying to find something new. And then, like, shortening the sexual session. What if the sexual section is 30 seconds, or 1 minute, 5 minutes, I don't care, right? Now, that's it. Then we're done. Then you walk off. You can come back 10 minutes later if you want. I don't care, but like, this is it. So now, can we focus for 30 seconds to a minute? Now we got, we do well with deadlines and under pressure. Gives us a lot of attention hormones. And we have to think about like, what can we do in this amount of time that's going to be engaging for us, right? Like, it's like a toddler. If you're not constantly entertaining it, it's going to fall asleep or flip out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but knowing that, you can entertain the toddler. And there's other ways you can distract, or if you distract and take a couple breaths, come back and see if you can find something interesting about what's currently happening. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just be like, oh yeah, I was thinking about the presentation. Cool. If I take a few deep breaths and I just find something interesting. You just take a few deep breaths and come back. Our brains don't do that. But you can interest them in something. So if we interest them in the sensation in my left pinky toe, and then we just focus on that for a few minutes. And then we go, oh, I wonder what's happening here, and I wonder what's happening here, and I wonder what's happening here. A few minutes later, you might be back there. Not all the time, right? And that's okay too. But this is just like the kind of tools that we weren't given that I want to make sure that people have. And if you're like, oh man, this stuff sounds like it might be helpful for me, but I don't have ADHD. Well, if anyone in your family has ADHD that you're blood related to, ADHD is 50 to 75% genetic. So maybe you do. Diagnosis though is not as important. The only reason you need a diagnosis is if you want medication. Diagnosis is not as important as, oh, I think this will be helpful to me. Let me try it. Oh, it is helpful. Great. I was talking yesterday, I was having this musing about how there was this continent that we now call South America, right? And then the Spanish and the Portuguese came in and they just started magic markering this landmass. They didn't take into account the humans that were already on this landmass. They didn't take into account what might be already happening on this landmass. They were just like, this is now this country, we will call it this. This is now this country, we'll call it this. And I feel like maybe when we talk about ADHD or other stuff, we might be doing that. We might be colonizing our minds in ways that are helpful to a point, right? Because if I feel like I can't succeed because things that you're telling me should work for everyone don't work for me. That's a problem, right? And if I say, oh, here's something that here's a word that's going to help you know that maybe my brain's unique and different than the brain over here. So maybe, like, it's not a rose, it's a sunflower. So maybe I'm going to treat it like a sunflower, then it can grow better. But outside of that, like, what does it mean to be diagnosed, not diagnosed? I'm not, super worried about that. I'm super worried about people loving themselves, knowing they're not broken, and being able to have fulfilling lives, relationships, and sexuality with themselves and others. Another really important thing I recommend. Masturbate curiously. Right? So maybe, especially if you have a lot of shame around always checking out during sex, you don't start with doing all this stuff with a partner. You just masturbate and just notice yourself and notice when you leave and notice you're going to come back and not beat yourself up for it. And notice how coming back for you is useful. Or which way of touching yourself is useful. Or in this moment, right? Everything's a snapshot. It doesn't tell us that you then have to report back to your partner. This is what happened if you have that, right? Just like masturbating curiously and being nice to yourself.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the diagnosis thing, because I think a lot of people, especially coming from my background in therapy, so many people get caught up with that labeling, you know, and to know now after this episode that having the label or having an exact diagnosis is really mainly only important if you are wanting medication. And for some people, maybe medication is needed. I know tons of people that are very anti-medication. They're wanting more holistic approaches, which is everything that you just laid out for us. And so I loved everything that you just shared, all those different tools, the incorporating the blindfold, masturbation, that is literally my middle name. Like, I love when people mention masturbation on here when it doesn't come from me, because I'm like, see, I'm not the only one that's preaching masturbation to y'all. The headphone things, that was an amazing resource. And I just think it's so important. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but when it comes down to desire, and, for women specifically, and I also mentioned Emily's book, Come As You Are, often on this podcast. So I feel like by now listeners should be very well versed in this book. However, when she's talking about desire and how our brains work for females, we're wired to think a million different thoughts in a second, versus males, typically they can focus on one thought much easier than a woman can. And so then to tie in and throw in ADHD on top of that, all of these tools that you just shared with us, Chris, can be applied whether or not somebody has ADHD, and solely if you're someone that is struggling to get, quote unquote, in the mood when it comes down for intimate time.
People with ADHD generally are not interested in the product, they're interested in the process. Mm-hmm. Which makes us a lot of times seem flaky. But actually, if you tell us we have to get to an orgasm, that can be enough to be like, no thank you. But if you tell us, spend 10 to 15 minutes playing and exploring each other's bodies in ways we haven't before, that's something that, depending on, brains are kind of like assholes, like, you can go in only when they're interested. So, like, you can't just, you can, you're gonna hurt yourself. You gotta, see if your butthole is also interested in having sex, as well. Same thing with your brain. So, everything I'm saying, we gotta check in with our brain. Be like, hey brain, how are you today? If your brain's like, look, I'm sleepy, or I'm all over the place, or I'm just not interested. There are things you can do to see if we can get there. But if we have to get there, then you're going to pitch a whole thing. Mm-hmm. So just the journey is the destination. There isn't a destination. Destination is to connect with yourself or to connect with another person. Full stop.
Hmm. And would you say in your work and the research that you've done with this, would you say that there are any gender differences notable when it comes down to ADHD and sex?
Yeah, so I think personally that the amount of gender stuff that is in our DNA is not really, it's not the biggest point, right? Mm-hmm. I think our socialization, even from the time that we're infants, they had the same baby. They told the baby it was a boy baby, and they told it was a girl baby. And when they told them it was a boy baby, they took them 3 times as long to go in and comfort the infant. It's the same kid, same cry, same everything, right? So from the time that we're born, are completely socialized differently in the United States. Right? That's the other thing about a lot of these diagnoses are based on social of the United States. So if we're looking at Asia, it's a totally different thing. So do I think that there's I think that the work of looking at how women work within the world is very important because the socialization a lot of times is so different. But there are cultures where the dominant person is the matriarch and so this idea that this is automatically roles that we play because of our DNA, I think is not accurate. And since 1 out of every 100 people has some combination of both genitalia, that's a huge amount of the population. When we talk about men and women, we are discounting. So I prefer to talk about how we are socialized, because then a lot of men too with ADHD say I have more of the women traits. What is that? You were socialized to value other people over yourself. Right? And there's a lot more to that, obviously, but I think that there's a lot more juicy stuff in the socialization stuff, especially because what is a normal range of testosterone is huge. I forget the exact range right now, but it's a massive range. So people will, like, trans people will go on testosterone or go on estrogen, they'll be like, wow, look at all this stuff I didn't know was happening. But they're also taking a big dose of estrogen and testosterone. They're at the high end of what is average.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going from one end right to the other end, right? So, but what is normal, quote unquote, right, in our society? There's such a range there. A lot of what we are experiencing when we are chalking up to our genitals, is social, in my experience and in my research.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And that goes to say that any of the tools or challenges that we discussed on this podcast can apply no matter what gender you identify with.
Yeah. 100%. That's why I recommend Emily's books to everyone. I would say, like, look, I know she says female. Just leave that part at the door. Mm-hmm. Keep going. Mm-hmm. No matter what, because this is just, all she's saying is people that have not been in the patriarchal lens, right? Mm-hmm. At all. Let's look at that for a second and look at what, if we break it down and stop making all these assumptions based on patriarchy, right? And then there's all these men that can't go automatically, like, from 0 to 60 or can't shock their brains. And then what's wrong with them, right? Nothing. Right. It turns out, right? It's just that we've taught men, also a big thing we've taught men to do is repress any feelings. Mm-hmm. One thing we've taught women to do is express all the feelings. Right? So, Esther Perel, love her in the way that she talks about this and talks about how everyone has these tools, but it's about, like, what part of the tools you fed, you know? Mm-hmm. And then, like, women are taught to be verbal and men are taught to be doers. Right? So a lot of men are good at doing, a lot of women are good at verbalizing. That's just what we've been practicing our entire lives. Mm-hmm. I practice shooting a bow and arrow for 36 years. I'm really good at it now too, right? Mm-hmm. So just acknowledging, Brene Brown, she wrote a few books and then this guy came up to her and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about how if I try to be vulnerable and express myself, that my kids and my wife would lose all respect for me. They would rather me die on top of my white horse than fall off of it. And I think when we talk about how, and so we assume, right, that men can pay attention better or can be more single focused. Or have they committed murder to the parts of themselves that would allow them to be all over the place? Have we expected so little of them that they don't have to think about more things? Have we expected them to just go home, give us a paycheck, and go to sleep? Yeah. Right? Like, how does that affect it? So, yeah.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah, and you're mentioning all my favorite people, Renee and Esther and, yeah, Emily, all of them.
And I know, I was listening to your podcast, I'm like, oh, we're going to get along just fine. Yeah.
So is there anything else as we're kind of wrapping up here? Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you feel like is worthy of being on this podcast episode today?
Yeah, just one of the resources I would give people if they are looking, if they're like, oh wow, this resonates a lot. Read Your Brain Is Not Broken. I don't remember who wrote it now. It's just put ADHD, Your Brain Is Not Broken. It's technically about how to be productive with ADHD, but the thing is, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And the nice thing about our brains, we can extrapolate a lot. But even if we don't extrapolate, even if we just are able to go through a day, be understanding where we're going from, being nicer to ourselves, our sex life will get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It definitely will. And that is one thing that I preach often on here. And again, going back to when you mentioned have curiosity when masturbating, it always has to start with us. No matter what issue, what thing you're facing or dealing with in life, you have to start internally. There's no one else out there that's going to solve your problems. Sure, you can hire a coach, you can hire a therapist, a doctor, whatever, that can help guide you through that. And while I do feel like there's many benefits to that, of course, we're coaches ourselves, but still, that person, that professional can give you all of the things, all of the tools and resources until they're blue in the face, yet you still have to be the person that's doing the work. And that's the same reason as it goes, is like when you experience success in life or failure in life, like we have to take credit for those things. I say we as in you, the person doing the things, you take credit for those things. It's not you're not going to give credit to the people that were there to guide you, because it comes down to us again doing the work. And especially when it comes down to sexuality and learning your body. And now in relation to this episode, learning your brain and getting really, really familiar with your brain and the way that it checks in and checks out. And now incorporating some of these tools that you shared today, Chris, I think that this is great practice for people that may or may not have ADHD.
I think a little differently about it. Yes, we have to do our part, but we are pack animals. We are social creatures. Mm-hmm. I think this idea that we give ourselves credit and don't give credit to the community that got us here, I think is flawed, because I think the pack is required for success, especially since we're like mushy people, right? Mm-hmm. I think that there's something really important about needing help, asking for help, and especially within the ADHD community, there's a lot of shame around saying like, hey, I can't clean my own house.
No.
Right? There's a lot of shame around asking for help. So yes, you do have to do your part, but I think this idea that like you succeed and you fail on your merit or like yourself, doesn't resonate with me, because, we're social creatures and we're meant to be in community. And this idea even that like we're supposed to parent with just 2 people. No, we're supposed to have a whole village. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Like, this is the standards that we're given, even for neurotypical people, are wild. So then when you add a neurodiversity on top of it, society that doesn't accommodate that, getting help, asking for help, and leaning on that help as much as you need to, I feel like is really important. And then of course you do some of the work, but like I think for me it's more spread out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I appreciate you offering that insight for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for coming on and talking about this. How can people find you, or how do you prefer that people find you if they're interested in working with you or talking with you more about this?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is Instagram. It's at distractedlovechris. And I do have the website distractedlove.com as well. So Instagram goes down again. There's still a way to get in touch with me. But Instagram and DMing me is usually the best way to get in touch with me. As both a millennial and someone with ADHD.
Perfect. Yeah. And we'll make sure to link both of those in the show notes. And you had mentioned your resource that you have, the course that you have. Is that available on your website as well, the dating course that you had mentioned?
Yeah, it is. I'm not currently running it right now because I am writing a book. Nice. So I'm trying to do boundaries and like not burn myself out, which is a whole skill in and of itself.
Yes.
So yes, there are, you can schedule appointments with me on there. And we can see if there's something we can work out around the schedule. But for the next 2 months, so this is being recorded on February 17th. So for the next 2 months, I'm going to be pretty much nose down banging out this book. But once it is out to publishers, I will be back on
Awesome.
in more fashion.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on writing that book, and definitely good luck with your book writing journey. I know that's a whole beast in and of itself. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Chris, for coming on today. Like I said, we'll link all of her information in the show notes, and it sounds like Instagram is the place to be. If you're not already there, make sure you give Chris a follow, because she posts a ton of great content, as related to today's podcast episode. So, all right. I hope you all have a good day, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a thing. And if you loved it so fucking much, be sure to leave a 5-star review. I'll see you next week, and until then, keep owning your sexual self.